Hey folks, today's video we got an M125X Kubota. I don't know if you can hear it or not. It's not running very good. So the story on this one is it's making oil, but it's not losing coolant. And it's smoking quite a bit of blue, which is a bit normal because it's pretty cold right now. We got minus 26 today, Celsius. But this tractor has got new injectors and it still runs bad and it still makes a lot of oil. The oil level keeps going up. So obviously what's happening is it's filling with diesel fuel. They've gone through and replaced that lift pump already. That lift pump is common to put that inside the case, and that did not fix the problem. But as soon as I can hear it run, I can tell right away we got an engine issue. So I'm very certain that what we're going to wind up having here is one of the cylinders is down, probably washed out. The piston's probably toast. But I need to get this in the shop, get it apart, at least a couple of things apart, and we want to do a compression test and see what we got here. All right, now that the tractor's warmed up, the smoke is cleared, but it still don't sound good. And we're pushing oil and fuel out of the blow-by tube there. So we definitely have a bad engine. Well, I kind of been working at this one between jobs here at the moment. I need to get this engine pressure tested, but I don't have the correct adapter for these injectors. Most of the Kubota ones, they want to sell you a glow plug adapter, but this tractor doesn't have glow plugs. It's got a big old grid heater, which is way better than glow plugs in my opinion. But anyways, I'm going to be waiting a week to a week and a half to get the right adapter for this, so I don't want to wait that long. I'm tempted to talk to my customer and just see if we can just rip this thing apart. It would be really nice to know what the actual compression is before I do that, but sometimes you just got to get it done. It's concerning me a little bit though, doing an in-frame on this tractor. We want to drop the oil pan so that you can get at the main bearings and the rod bearings, and that oil pan splits right here. This might be a good time to say, like, I'm not terribly familiar with Kubotas, and I've never done one of these engines before. This is a little different. Anyway, so it splits right here and right here, which is fine. That drops down to take the loader bracket off the bottom there. But if we look in the front here, these bolts right there, those are studs. And they're studded into that main housing. So in order to get the oil pan off, it almost looks like you have to unbolt the front of the tractor and roll it ahead. But then I'm a little bit concerned about the back here, how this is supposed to come apart too. And then looking underneath, we got our MFWD drive shaft here, and it goes right through the oil pan right there. So not exactly sure how this is supposed to split apart here. So I think I'm going to drop this for today. And I'm going to get me a book for this tractor because I don't have a book for this one, and find out what I'm actually up against here. I mean, in a way it doesn't matter because to fix this engine it's going to have to come apart. I can pretty well promise you that at this point. But I just like to know what I'm getting into. Yeah, we're going to stick with that plan. I'm going to drop this for a bit and just get myself a book and see how this actually comes apart. Alright, so this morning we're going to talk a little bit about real life. So this tractor has one bad cylinder for sure, maybe more. I would like to compression test it, but I don't have the right adapter for these injectors, and I can't seem to locate one anywhere close by. I can order a new one, but it's going to take a week to 2 weeks to get it. So that's a bit of a bummer. Most of these adapters are glow plug adapters, but like I said before, this one doesn't have glow plugs. It's got a far superior grid heater instead. So I don't have that option. Otherwise it would be fairly easy to make my own. So that's a bit of a problem. So then I said, well, then I'm just going to tear this thing apart. I know it needs a cylinder anyway at this point. I already know that. So I might as well just tear it apart and find out, get into it and find out what we got all going on. And if there's more cylinders or what, you know, once you get them apart, you can tell on the piston, the liner, and the rings if it's a bad cylinder or not. So you would think you could just in-frame this, right? But no, you can't. As I showed before, you can't get the oil pan off because of the way this is designed. So I didn't actually have a book for an M125X, so I got my hands on a book. And as you can see in the picture here, showing removing the engine to overhaul it. And that's exactly the problem. You can see the drive shaft going through the bottom of the oil pan. That's an issue. And then you have, at the front of the motor, these studs here. Those are studded through the oil pan, so you can't get the oil pan off without splitting the front end off of the motor. And then at the back, the flywheel is coupled directly into the transmission, just like a regular tractor would be. So it takes 2 splits to get the engine out, and then you can get the oil pan off. And you have to get the oil pan off so that you can get at the connecting rods and the mains and stuff like that to pull your pistons out and to pull liners out and all that kind of stuff. So this just winds up being a pretty big job that needs a lot of room, which is fine. But the issue is the room. I split this tractor and roll the front end up here a little bit, pick that motor off of there. I can roll the front of it back in, I guess, and I could probably put the motor here, but I got no room to put all these parts. And that's something that sometimes the guy doesn't think about. You know, you take this Steiger, for instance, the engine is out of it. This is some of the pieces here. I got a few things for it tucked in behind the tractor. I got a few things stuck underneath the tractor. Not that tire, that belongs to something else. And of course, you got your coolant and everything that you drain out of there. And then I have my shelving units. On the top shelf is mostly storage stuff on both of those. This is all 855 stuff from the Steiger. That is all 855 stuff. That is all 855 stuff. That's 855 crank. This is some storage underneath here. This is all 855 stuff. This is all 855 stuff. I'm all bunged up in the back. Everything is just, I just don't have enough room to do this right now. An engine job takes an enormous amount of space if you're going to keep things organized and proper. Up at the front, I got one of my boys is working on a snowmobile. One of my other boys has got this little 3-cylinder Kubota all blown apart in 1,000 pieces. I got more storage and some garbage that needs to get taken out. I got motor stand. That project is waiting for a motor job too. Pressure washer. I got my fuel and oil barrels there for when I drain big tanks. Have to pump them back in. Like, I just don't have enough room to get on this tractor and get it split properly. My shop is just too full. So here's the plan. I talked to my customer. I'm very, 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 very fortunate that it's the dead of winter. He doesn't have to have this tractor right now. So I'm going to kick this guy outside for now. And when this engine and everything gets back from the machine shop, which that block and heads have been there for a month, I'm going to have to phone them again and put some pressure on. I got to get this stuff back and get this tractor out of here. It's just using up 2/3 of my shop. But anyway, when this tractor is done and out, then I'm going to pull this tractor into that bay. The floor is better here for splitting anyway. So I'm going to split that tractor in here, tear it all apart. By then, my shelving will be mostly empty. And then I can stack all my parts on here from this other tractor. Might do a little better organizing up top. It's been a really, really busy summer. I just haven't had time to have my shop the way I like it. It's just a pigsty right now. But anyway, what am I going to do in this bay then? Well, there's never any shortage of work. I got this DT466. I'm going to wind up sticking in here, and I'll tear this one apart. And I guess I have that whole bay for this one engine, so then I'm going to lay down a bunch of cardboards and spread all my pieces on the floor, which is not the way I like to do things, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do because this is real life and things don't always work out the way you want. So that's the plan. I'm going to kick this guy back out, throw the hood on, and he's going to sit outside until I'm ready for him. So as far as this video goes, I will see you when I'm ready to work on this tractor again. Huh. Why is this not working? Try that again. Now it's 110. going on here? This time it's 40. What is happening here? I always get the weird ones. All right, what's going on? Okay. That explains things. All right, this is a weird one, which makes sense because I always get the weird ones. So I finally got my hands on a compression test adapter for this engine. It took a few tries, but I finally got the right one that fits in here. Neat little 5-cylinder engine. All right, so I started with a compression test, and I started with the number 1 hole, and I mean, I compression tested number 1 3 or 4 times with 2 different compression testers because every time I tested it, I got a different result. It never tested the same pressure. So this tractor factory spec, according to the book, is 500 PSI. Minimum is 371. Number 5 came in at 360. So he's a little low. 385, 385, 385. And number 1 was like sometimes 0, sometimes 120, sometimes 40. It was just all over the place. So I thought, well, that's got to be a valve issue. Like, what else is going to cause that? So I pulled the valve cover off, and then right away, I saw that this rocker isn't even on the valve. It's sitting on the retainer. Well, that should explain some things. And then I noticed that the valve button is gone, like these guys here. It's missing, and it's down underneath inside there. And then I noticed that this one also is gone, and it's sitting right there. And then I was looking, and oh yeah, so this push rod is bent, so that's why this is off. And then this push rod, well, it doesn't have a push rod. There's just nothing here. It's just a loose rocker. So that push rod, I take it, is down in the bottom of that hole somewhere. So that explains a lot. What happened? Well, I really don't know. So I'm gonna loosen off this guy and see if I can pull that push rod out and look down inside there and see if I can tell anything about that lifter. And then I'm gonna try to stick a magnet down and get this push rod out of this side too. I don't know how jammed it's gonna be in there or what. We'll find out. Well, I got the bent push rod out, and the other one was broken, and the other half of it is down inside the block, and it's jammed over like that, and so I can't get that out of there. I really want to pull the head to get it off because these holes to access that are so tiny. I just can't get anything down inside there, and the turbo's in the way. But what if I don't need to pull the head? I'm pretty sure this number 1 cylinder is going to be completely shot from all the fuel just washing down there, because diesel fuel does not have nearly the lubrication properties of engine oil. But what if I'm wrong? And how do I tell? Well, you can see my hose hooked on here, and that goes over to my leak down tester. So I'm going to do a leak down test on cylinder number 1, and that will tell me if the valves are sealing, because if the valves are sealing, then probably I don't have to take the head off for that. And it will also tell me if the rings are sealing. And again, if the rings are sealing, well, then I don't need to take the head off to rebuild that number 1 cylinder. So I'm kind of thinking at this point I'm going to do a leak down test and find out as best as I can what the health of that cylinder actually is. So if you've never used one of these things before, it basically measures calibrated leakage. Shop air pressure comes in one side, you got a regulator to adjust your set point, and then this side has an orifice in there, and it measures the back pressure basically of how much is flowing through versus how much is coming in, and it reads the differential, and that tells you what your leak down is in the cylinder. So you want to have both of your valves closed. So normally you would roll the engine over to compression stroke on whatever cylinder you're checking, and that means your valves are both closed, and then you can do your check. In this case, because I have the rockers off, the valves are both closed, so it doesn't matter what position the engine is in, I can do the leak down test. These are an expensive tool, but they're sure nice to have around. So the first thing we're going to do is hook our shop air onto it, like so, and then we're going to set this up to 100 psi because that's your calibrated set point. So I just use the pressure regulator to bring it up. You can probably hear it hissing as air is leaking through. So you bring that to 100 and then you just check and see where this sits. Now I was absolutely positively 100% convinced that that number one cylinder was going to be totally shot because the fuel will have just washed all the oil off of the cylinder walls and it will have eaten the rings. Well, here's the leak down test. Let me turn my air on. So we're calibrated to 100, right where we should be. I'll hook my hose up here onto the adapter. Very, very, very rare that I do a leak down on an engine that's this tight. So up to 40% leakage is typically considered a healthy cylinder. This thing is like 5%. So that number one cylinder is in great shape. I mean, it doesn't mean that there isn't like a wrist pin problem or a bearing problem or something like that, that maybe the piston hit the valves or something. But there is no indication of that at this point. So at this point, I got a little bit of a change in plans. You see, normally what we would have to do is pull that head off and then inspect the number one cylinder to see if it's damaged. Well, that test right there just saved I don't know how many hours of work in doing that. But we still have a question that hasn't been answered, and that is, how did we get a bent and a broken push rod? What caused those to come out? So I know like some of these valves, they're very, very loose. Like there's a lot of play there. I haven't actually measured how much that is. Well, let me just measure it right now. So the tag on the valve cover says valve clearance, cold, 0.25 intake, 0.25 exhaust, millimeters. So that's 10 thousandths, which is 0.254 millimeters. So how's that? Oh yeah, that's like super, super, super loose. 30 thousandths is 0.762. Let's see how that one goes. Oh, even that's loose. Okay. Now I got a 15 thou and a 16 thou stacked together, so that would be 31 thousandths. Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. It's at 31 thousandths of an inch right now, that exhaust valve. And it's supposed to be 10 thou. So we got more than 3 times the valve lash that we should have. And that might be enough for that push rod to jump out of there, especially if this cylinder was worse than some of the others. Anyway, now we know that part, so back to what I was saying. I'm very tempted at this point to get 2 new push rods, put them in there, put this all back together, get the track, get all the fuel lines all back on, and get this thing running and see how it runs. And if it runs really nice and it doesn't smoke and it doesn't fill the crankcase with fuel anymore, might just send it home like this. That would not be all bad. I was fully expecting a rebuild here. So the biggest challenge for me now, I guess I'm going to take these rockers off and see if I can get that other part of the busted push rod out of there. I was able to fish those broken pieces out of that hole, so that, or actually that hole. So that was good. And then I threw a couple of these push rods down inside there and cranked it over, and the cam is turning. They walk up and down. The lifters, you can pull them up and down with a magnet. They feel really nice. Everything just seems to be perfectly fine. What I did find is that valve lash, the spec is 10 thousandths of an inch, and these valves were 31 to 35 thousandths. So 3 times the valve lash what there should be. It is possible that maybe number one was the loosest one, and so that's what allowed maybe one of these buttons to pop off, or allowed the push rod to pop out of place first, and then of course when it's bouncing up and down it just gets smashed in there. That might be what happened. That's the only thing that I can find. Everything all seems to be just really nice. So honestly, I'm into it this far, but what I would like to do is get those 2 push rods, put the whole thing back together, set the valves, redo my compression test, just to make sure that everything is functioning the way it's supposed to, put the thing back together and run it. And unless I find something else at some point here, the way this looks, kind of seems like this engine just needed push rods. Well, push rods in a proper valve set. But if that's all it is, then man, I can't believe I was that fooled.